Hello, everyone. We are here indeed. I just had a little technical glitch in streaming to Twitch, so I just cut the stream to Twitch because we don't
Oh,
have too many people who watch on Twitch anyway.
yeah.
So, anyway, I noticed that some of you are here. Hello, Brandy. Great to see you. And hello, Dolores. As always, it's wonderful to see you. Please do share. And so today's topic, before I go into today's topic, I should say, welcome. I'm Joe Firestone, your host to MMT and the Public Purpose. And my guest for tonight is Matthew Waldie, who is a long
Hey, Joe.
time MMT person who has been on top of MMT now for a number of years. He started with the Real Progressives group, but he is now with Kerberos and is our head of information technology. I know that's not your exact
That's
title.
I run the website.
He runs the website and solves technical problems.
Yeah, that sometimes do. I probably need to do more, but I do my best.
Right, and he has some other additions to our website that are very important, and he's very important for the future of Kerberos as well. But apart from that, he's very, very good when it comes to MMT. And since he's been doing it for a fairly long time now, I thought he would be a very good person to join us tonight for this topic, which is MMT in politics. In other words, we're not talking now about the theoretical aspects, okay, of MMT or even the descriptive aspects of MMT. We're talking about the interventions of the MMTers into politics. In other words, what have we been doing in politics for years and years and years? And how successful have we been in getting introduced to the applied sphere of MMT? In other words, we're not talking about the theory now or description. We're talking about the policy applications. How have we gotten into that? How are we doing? Where are we going? Those are the kinds of things we're going to discuss here tonight. Okay, if it's okay with you, Matt, I think I'm going to start with kind of a list of things that I was aware of. And whenever you want to supplement what I have to say or add to it in any way, then just, kind of interrupt what I'm doing. I
That
prepared
sounds good.
I prepared a little list for this show, which I put on some PowerPoint slides. So I'm going to access those now, and we'll share them. So the title of this is MMT in American Politics, and of course, this slide set is probably going to be expanded a good deal over time because I wasn't expecting to have to do that, but the more I thought about this today, the more and more I came up with for this list. So I'm all too acutely aware that this is a list just to start things off, and
Yeah.
probably we would not finish this list and the discussion of this list here today. Probably we won't finish this list and the discussion of this list until someday in the future we actually write a book about it. But anyway, here is the list. I'm going to sort of start that off. The first thing that I was involved in terms of an MMT intervention in politics was the Fiscal Sustainability Teach-In Counter Conference on April 28, 2010. The slides for this are up on the web, on YouTube still. I shouldn't say the slides. Actually, the proceedings of the conference, are up there. But this conference was held in Washington, D.C. at George Washington on April 28, 2010. And the conference was organized in, the idea for the conference came up on April 9th. And we organized the conference between April 9th and April 28th. So what was that? In about 19 days, we got funding for the conference. We set the program. We got the people actually participating. And the people were Bill Mitchell and Stephanie Kelton and Warren Mosler, who did the luncheon presentation on it at lunchtime. Of course, luncheon presentation, lunchtime. And then we had a presentation from Marshall Auerbach on inflation. And then the final presentation for the day was split between Randy Ray and Pavlina Chernieva. And so these were, to say the least, very interesting presentations. They were all great. And after the presentations were given, there were very long Q&A periods, about a half hour each time.
Very cool.
And most of the major issues that have beset the MMT world since that time were raised in that particular Q&A sessions. And there were some people who who came to the Teach Encounter conference that later went into blogging, where they were specializing, in MMT blogs. And so there were a number of ripples from this conference that went out, and that affected things for some time. Now, you notice in this list, I don't mention the Modern Money Network streams.
Yeah.
Came about a little later I think in 2012. And the reason why I don't is because I recall they were not about the politics of MMT so much.
Okay.
They were about the theory, of MMT, or they were about, differences between the MMT approach and the Austrian approach.
Yeah.
They were concerned with MMT, and the law, the foundation, and the law, but they were not directly concerned with politics. But this fiscal sustainability conference was conceived as a response to the Peter G. Peterson Foundation Fiscal Summit, the first one that was being held on the same day, also in Washington, D.C. And this conference was conceived of as an answer to the fiscal summit, of Peter G. Peterson, that had all these big name people coming to it that must have had $200,000 or $300,000 that was spent on it, that was affiliated with the administration and the administration's effort to basically constrain spending and take control, of entitlements. It was part of Obama's first efforts to actually to impose austerity on the country. And in this conference, we were opposing that with some of the people who later became the very big names, of MMT. So it was quite a cool conference. It was very political in character because we knew that we were answering the people across town who were trying to lay a foundation for austerity policies in of the federal government. Specifically, that conference was supporting the fiscal commission uh,
Hmm.
that Obama was setting up, that later became known as the Cat Food Commission. Okay, so that was going on, okay, in April of 2010. There
Hmm.
were a lot of other things going on in April and May and June of 2010. Uh, for example, there were visits to legislators and to the administration.
Hmm.
And Warren Mosler, okay, and Stephanie Kelton were making those visits.
Oh.
And they went to see Manny Cleaver, okay, at that time to try to brief him, okay, on MMT and persuade him to be sensible in his approach to things.
Hmm.
But also, they went to see Jeffrey Zients. They actually got in to see him inside,
Hmm.
the Obama administration. Of course, he continued to be important in the whole of the Obama administration, and now he's working for Biden and
Yeah.
is an important figure in that administration. But they went to see him and to brief him, but on MMT,
Hmm.
they tried to get him to listen, not very successfully. But Warren had earlier seen a lot of different people trying to brief them, okay, on MMT,
Hmm.
including Larry Summers,
Yep.
okay, and some others. Al Gore, as I recall, okay, well, but that went back to like the year 2000 or
Hmm.
thereabouts, 2003. So there were these visits to legislators and administration people that had been going on for a long time, actually, before I got involved with MMT, which was in December of 2000, okay, and 9.
Hmm.
Uh, the first of my blogs, okay, on MMT appeared, okay, at that time. But then later in June of 2010, there was a big event going on that was really affiliated with the Peterson Foundation also, because they'd gotten a lot of grant money from the Peterson Foundation. There was
Oh.
an organization back then that was known, okay, as America Speaks,
Hmm.
and they were having these conferences in June 2010, all occurring simultaneously, and they were doing it in something like 20 cities around the country, 25
Wow.
cities around the country. One of the conferences were here in Falls Church,
Hmm.
and I went to attend that conference actually with my daughter,
Hmm.
uh, and tried to put a monkey wrench into the proceedings by bringing in the MMT points of view, okay, in that.
Yeah.
I don't know how successful I was in persuading people, okay, of MMT.
Yeah.
I know that I was successful in getting people to see how silly the whole thing was, because the results from our conference, which was one of the 25, was such that the whole program of America Speaks was disturbed by the
Hmm.
verdict of people at that particular conference. And I think this went on actually in a number of the cities, okay, across the country, because the final results of the America Speaks conferences were not in line with what they were looking for. There were reports that were put out in August of 2010,
Hmm.
and the reports were not, I know, were not what they intended to get.
Hmm.
So that was happening at that time. At roughly the same time, or maybe a bit earlier, there was testimony to Congress.
Hmm.
Jamie Galbraith was successful in getting himself and Warren Mosler and Randy Ray into Congress to testify on the idea of generational accounting,
Uh-huh.
because the Peterson group, the austerity mongers in D.C., were
Hmm.
trying to get everybody to accept the idea of generational accounting, because if the idea was fully accepted by the Congress, it would mean that the Peterson Foundation and their associated think tanks and forces would be able to make the case that the federal government owed something like $100 trillion, and that this could never be paid back until well,
Yep.
what they were trying to do was totally opposed to any reasonable kind of accounting principles. And,
Hmm.
and Jamie, Warren and Randy, in their testimony, made that quite clear and shot all kinds of holes in generational accounting. And
Hmm.
while it continued to be something the Austerians, would try to self-organize around, it
Hmm.
never really worked. They never got out of Congress what they wanted, was the acceptance, of generational accounting.
Yeah.
Okay, then the next thing that I became aware of that, where lots of MMTers were getting involved was in the debt ceiling crisis of 2011,
Hmm.
which occurred. First of all, it only occurred because the Obama administration had been incompetent in doing the politics.
Hmm.
Uh, they didn't do much for the people doing 2009 and 2010.
Hmm.
They wasted a lot of time
On
trying to
political
get,
capital.
yes, a lot of political capital, a lot of time, because there was continuous focus on getting some kind of health care bill out.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to try to get a Medicare for all bill out because the administration was against it from the
Hmm.
start. So they
Yes. And
kept trying to trim and get some halfway compromise out.
yep.
And they weren't able to pull the whole party together to vote for that because there wasn't enough support for the
Hmm.
horrors they were putting together. And then what finally happened, is that Nancy Pelosi in the spring of 2010 tried to get something out just for the sake of getting something
Yes.
out.
Yeah.
And we put together a compromise that left the pharmaceutical companies, uh,
Yes.
and also the health
It,
insurance companies
insurance companies afloat.
control.
Yep. Yeah, and unfortunately, Senator Grassley and several others had pointed out to Obama that he could have gotten him for all. At the very least, he definitely had in his hip pocket the public option.
Yes, he had
And
public option in his hip pocket, but he didn't really want the public option, even though
no,
he ran on the public option.
exactly. Well, but he could have gotten him for all. There's a lot of evidence to show that he had the political capital to do that at that time, but had no desire to because, well, actually, still in office, one of their largest donors is the insurance lobby.
Also,
So
not to mention the pharmaceutical companies. They
yes,
were
and
taking
yeah,
huge
and the
amounts of
pharmaceutical
money from
companies.
both those interests.
Yes, and the pharmaceutical did not want the price controls, but also realized that if the price controls and the government was the one buying it, that M for all would not be an end of their lives, right? Pharmaceutical companies can still make, but the insurance company knew that was it. I mean, there was no way that they
They
could do
knew
what
that
they were
was it,
doing.
so they were very much opposed to it. But to make
Yes,
the
very
case
much.
that Obama could have done it,
Hmm. And
what?
they strong armed the AMA into believing that if they didn't say that M for all was a bad idea, that they would have brought down the businesses, doctors and things, so they would grind it to a halt.
But I don't think they could have brought down the doctors because by that
No,
time, doctors realized that Medicare for all was the solution for them.
yes, threats though worked, and they did work,
Now, I'm not
and
sure if threats worked as much as it wasn't so much threats. It was just Obama, Pelosi.
oh, not on that end. I'm talking about the AMA. The AMA's buckling was purely because they felt forced into it. They had enough of their people that were insurance lobbyists already that were in high positions at the AMA, and they just bought hook, line, and sinker that the whole system would collapse if they got rid of the insurance company.
But just from the standpoint, of votes,
Oh yeah.
first of all, Pelosi controlled the Congress. They were 200. I'm sorry, the House. There were 245 Democrats in that
Yep.
House, and of course, she had iron control. Okay, of discipline if she wanted to exert it.
Hmm.
Certainly could have given away quite a few House votes and still gotten a majority for a Medicare for All bill.
Yep.
And
Yep.
moving to the Senate, okay, and
She's
moving to
probably the third richest person that got rich after coming into office
yeah,
for her insider trading knowledge that she handed off to her husband. I mean, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars in perfectly timed trades that
absolutely
nobody
true,
sniffs at.
absolutely true. And she was taking a lot of money from the insurance interests at the time,
A lot.
directly herself, but her major lieutenants were also raising all kinds of money from them.
Yep.
Okay, so the
But
point
what
is,
could they
it
do?
never
They
got
couldn't.
through. It never
Go ahead.
got through because of the leadership. Going
Hmm.
into the Senate,
Oh, I
the
agree.
Democrats were elected with 58 votes uh,
Hmm.
in the Senate. And over the next 12 months, they gained first a 59th vote and then a 60th vote. So they had 60 Democrats
Hmm.
that were available to vote for it. Now, of course, they couldn't get all 60. There was no way they could get all 60, but they had the 60, and they could have used the nuclear option
Yep.
to create a situation where they needed only 50 votes plus the
Yeah.
vice president. So
And the truth about that
given
nuclear
away,
option.
at one point, they could have given away 10
Yep.
senatorial votes and
Yep.
still passed the Medicare for All bill. So you have to
Yes.
ask yourself and Obama
Yeah.
why they didn't pass the Medicare for All bill then,
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
that.
The no. And if they bring up that nuclear option, it's ridiculous, right? Because in 2016, to get through their SCOTUS selection, they are instead of doing it for Merrick Garland, what they did it, McConnell did it in 2020 to push through. We're just gonna do the nuclear option for just this vote, and then we'll go back. Nobody said shit about that. Nobody
Uh,
was like, "Oh, what are you gonna do? You're gonna blow up the whole system. Now you're gonna have to let the Democrats do it." None of that. It's just
uh,
nonsense.
right, but this goes back actually to Harry Reid, who
Yeah.
his judicial appointments were getting blocked by the Republicans all the time. So
Yes, they were.
pulled the nuclear option out so he could get the judicial appointments through.
But
Then,
it
after he did
they think that
that,
it applies to everything though. They think all of a sudden you do that once and it's now a nuclear option. We have to do it all the time. That's not the case.
that's
It's
true.
something
That's true.
you just write
Harry
into
Reid
the bill.
proved
We're gonna
that
do
you could
do it.
just do a carve out.
Yeah, it's just a part of the bill.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why we can't that's the most obvious way to know that they do not want something.
Yes. The most obvious way to know they don't want something. Absolutely true. Absolutely true. Okay. So, uh, I guess we're still talking about 2010. Okay, so the point
Yeah.
is, they took all that time in 2009. Oh, I said it. I'm sorry. When I said participation, no, that was 2010.
Yeah,
Uh,
you're
by
up to your platinum
the time,
coin.
yeah, but by the time of the America Speaks conference, they had already passed the Affordable Care Act.
Hmm.
Okay, because it passed in March of 2000. Okay, and 10. So we were really aware at that time that the administration, contrary to all the popular press, and they had to say, was a very conservative administration. And we, I mean the MMT people, started fighting to try to get people to recognize the administration had much more capacity to spend than it was letting on. Okay, so because they didn't do enough good things for people, they really got trounced in the election of 2000, okay, and 10.
Yep.
And not only in the Congress, they got trounced across the country.
Hmm.
They lost so many state legislatures, so many governorships. It was a disaster for the Democratic Party. Why? Because the Democratic Party would not represent the people. They only wanted to represent the donors.
Yep.
So, yeah, that's not a new story. It's an old story. It's been going
Yep.
on for a very long time, and it was very visible in 2010. So, getting back to the story, the Republicans won.
Yep.
And when they won, the first thing they thought up is we're going to use our power in the House of Representatives to cause debt ceiling crises for the Democrats, and we'll use the leverage of the debt ceiling crises to work with the administration to cut budgets and cut entitlements and do these very nice things that we want to do and that supposedly the administration does not want to do. So the first of these debt ceiling crises was in the summer of 2011. Okay, and of course the administration was trying to say it didn't have any money, it was not capable of doing anything. It had to negotiate with the Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
So it began to negotiate with the
Mm-hmm.
Republicans. But Obama didn't just want to give in to the Republicans because he thought they were asking too much and he had to put up a front. Okay.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, there's a lot of ferment going on which involved the MMTers because this idea had come out, okay, of MMT to use platinum coin seniorage. There was a
Mm-hmm.
bill that passed in 1995 or 96, I forget actually the year, and the bill specified that 1 ounce platinum coins could be minted by the mint at the direction of the Secretary of the Treasury with an arbitrary face value on those particular coins. And an MMTer blogging under the handle, okay, of Beowulf, but came up with the idea. He pointed out,
Mm-hmm.
well, if that's what the law says, okay, and Beowulf, okay, was a lawyer. Carlos Mucha, okay, is his actual name.
Uh,
He wrote the first blog in early January of 2011 on this and suggested the idea actually long before this in something like May 2010 in some comments that he made. Uh, he suggested that $1 trillion coins were possible.
mm-hmm.
And of course, then other people chimed in, such as myself. I strongly supported Carlos's blog, and in fact, did most of the blogging in favor of platinum coin seniorage from January of 2011 to the summer, okay, of 2011. Okay, now I think this was noticed by Jamie Galbraith. All this talk about platinum coin seniorage, and he was
Mm-hmm.
working undercover, I believe, to inform other people of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so in July of that year, he got through to Felix Salmon, who was working for Reuters at that time. And Felix Salmon came out with the idea, on Reuters, and suddenly it went mainstream. I had a big post, okay, in Naked Capitalism at about the same time. So there was a Naked Capitalism post, for people to refer to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then all kinds of people, all of a sudden, you wouldn't believe how many people were writing about the platinum coin. towards the end of July, Paul Krugman was writing about the platinum coin.
Yeah, I read about it. That was my first little MMT moment.
Yeah,
I remember specifically when reading about it. So that was the first time I became aware of any of this at all.
yep. Uh, the pages of it first actually started up, okay, at Fire Dog Lake. That's where the first blogs were. Okay. Then
Hmm.
Warren picked it up for his blog on January 20th, okay, of that year. And that blog just exploded with comments and got all kinds of people involved in MMT. And that
Hmm.
blog post raised lots and lots of problems, okay, of MMT, which then were answered by people.
Yeah.
So there was something for other people to pick up. And slowly more blog posts started to appear between January and June. But in
Hmm.
July, after the Felix Salmon thing, there was an explosion between about July 10th and August the 2nd. And more things got out. I don't know if it was noticed by the Obama administration or not. Um,
Hmm.
but all I know is that the Obama administration came to agreement with the Republicans on August the 2nd to shut off the whole controversy, okay, and to create some kind of compromise with them that
Hmm.
was not going to be too bad for people. But of course, it gave away some things that it did not have to give away. And Mitch
No.
McConnell was very happy with the outcome. Okay, I know that. Okay, at that
Yeah,
time.
but it's the back office, negotiating with the CEO.
Absolutely.
That's how
Just
I
to
would
go
like to look at it. The CEO's got a certain type of what he wants or she wants, and the back office of what they need, and they come to this little meeting in the agreement, and well, you know that everybody that's an employee there is.
Okay, so their agreement on August 2nd shut down the hubbub about this, the controversy
Hmm.
about it. It was amazing. Between everything was going crazy from July 10th to August 2nd. By August 3rd, all the blogs about the platinum coin, the $1 trillion coin, shut down overnight
Hmm.
because the administration had made a controversy stop. Okay, and nobody was looking at the future. You know, what's going to happen in the future? Going to be more of these debt ceiling crises? Well,
Hmm.
while I kept on blogging about the platinum coin because I knew it was coming back,
Hmm.
in fact, I think during that summer, I even suggested that a $1 trillion coin, we need a $1 trillion coin, we need a $30 trillion coin, something like
Yeah,
that.
no reason not to.
Yeah, no reason not to have a $30 trillion coin, which later on I
Debt to
changed.
China paid. Boop.
Right, right. All the debt to be totally paid off,
Yeah.
which I was very
Right.
interested in doing, not because the debt was significant from a fiscal sustainability point of view, but because
Yep.
the
Oh,
debt,
Rowan Gray loves it. Rowan Gray talks about it all the time. That's his. Well, I think that's one of his favorite things, right, to
yeah,
discuss.
he picked it up from me.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I really wouldn't doubt it. He loves the whole concept and the whole idea, and he's still using it today,
He
over and
was
over again.
in he was in the discussions on Warren's site on January 20th, okay, of that year.
Yeah.
So he was part of those particular discussions. And he and some friends of his came out uh, in the spring and
Hmm.
suggested that they do a stunt, create a giant version of the platinum coin with no platinum actually in it,
Yeah.
wheels, and roll that down Constitution Avenue till they got to the Federal Reserve. They never did go through with it, but it was a
Uh,
tremendous idea for a stunt. Yeah, and Rowan
yeah.
has loved that idea actually since that time.
Well,
Uh,
it solves all the problems with the digital transfer, and that's where it really does. I mean, if we can mint the amount that we need to start the digital currency, that's the backing that actually creates the value to the digital currency,
yes,
and
and
it's still completely controlled by the federal government.
uh,
It's awesome.
that was an idea that he developed, okay, at a later time.
Yeah.
What
Oh
he
yeah.
was
Sorry.
interested in,
Yes.
at that time, in 2011, uh, was just the idea that we could get rid of the debt and not have it be a political problem. We
Yep.
both were interested in getting rid of that kind of problem. We knew
Yep.
there was no financial problem. We knew the
No,
level
it's
of debt
symbolic.
wasn't
Com-
important, and we knew the
No, no,
debt to GDP ratio was not important. But we
nope.
also
Japan
knew
did it.
that if we didn't wipe the debt, but from the books, that the right wing would continually use that to terrorize people,
Yep.
and that's why we
And
want
they still do.
that, and they still do, and they still do. So then there was the next debt ceiling crisis in 2012, 2013. Now, I should say before I go into that, that all through this time, there were blogs appearing at the UMKC site, which was the center of MMT thinking, okay, at that time, because
Mhm.
the editor of the blog at that time was Stephanie Kelton. Okay. And so uh, there were lots of blogs on that site that got into politics. But of course, most of the blogs on the site were still about the basics of
Mhm.
MMT, the theory, okay, and the
Mhm.
description and sectoral balances and all those kinds of things. Uh, I think it was a minority of the blogs that were concerned with the politics.
Mhm.
Specifically Bill Black's blogs, um,
Mhm.
and my blogs, and a
Mhm.
few others were concentrating on the politics of the situation.
Mhm.
But anyway, the next debt ceiling crisis came about in 2012 and lasted until I think January 15th, January 17th, to January 18th of 2013.
Mhm.
But the furor over the platinum coin, that ceiling crisis started in something like October of 2012 because the
Mhm.
Republicans had again started threatening another debt ceiling crisis at that time. So again, interest exploded
Mhm.
even more than in the summer before that.
Mhm.
A huge number of publications were carrying blogs about the platinum coin, okay, and what it could do. Most of the
Mhm.
solutions, though, were about using the $1 trillion coin to get by the debt ceiling crisis.
Yeah.
There were very few people thinking about the bigger implications of the platinum coin.
Yep.
Now, at one point during that controversy, Stephanie suggested, let's do $100 trillion coin. Okay, and ever since then, she's been trying to run away from that suggestion.
Hmm.
Okay, because she realized that, oh, people will think I'm a kook if I keep on going with the $100 trillion coin. So she kind of withdrew from that and stopped talking about $100 trillion coins. And
Mhm.
generally didn't talk very much about the platinum coins at all, but
No.
kept to the basics, okay, of MMT and the political implications, okay, of MMT. She was very active in terms of the political implications, okay, of MMT, but
Yes.
she didn't focus on the platinum coin following that. But
Well, we know that the
anyway,
platinum coin is
uh,
a symbol, right? It's not necessary. It's just something that allows, people, the conservatives, to hold on to something and pretend that it means that the government is minting this coin here. I think that Stephanie did back off because she didn't want someone to coup, but I also think that she backed off because overall we can just do this, right? We don't need the platinum coin to wipe out debt. We can just pay everything over into the from the one account to the other account and no longer give interest on those accounts. It's
you're
a
right.
matter of
But so Matt, there's something wrong with your mic. If you could either get closer, or
Sure,
increase.
sure. Let me switch up here. I think my earbuds are having a hard time. Hold on a second.
Okay.
You suggested using the coin to take care of taking the.
I did.
Okay, let's see if that's better.
Okay, that sounds great.
Okay. All right. So does that sound better?
A little.
A little bit better.
A lot better, but
There's a. Oh yeah, that's the the fan is going now. Let me take care of that. I got another pair too. I can switch them out, but it sounds like my earbuds are not doing well for some reason.
all right. So let's see. Oh, there's an echo now coming from your.
Okay. Is there still an echo?
I don't know. Yeah, there's a big echo.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay now? Oh, Matt's coming in again.
More time. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now, and there's no echo.
Is that much better? Okay, we're good. I
Yeah,
fixed it.
that's fine.
Okay.
Okay, so to continue with the crisis of 2012 to 2013, at that point, the platinum coin actually got into the thick skull of the administration. They found that in press conferences, people were asking about using the platinum coin and using the 14th Amendment.
Mhm.
And one of the press conferences, what the Obama administration did was to explain that if we use the 14th Amendment, that was not a desirable thing to do because it would create a crisis in the market for U.S.
Mhm.
debt. And that also this was a problem for the platinum coin because it would create a problem in the market for U.S. debt. Of course, the obvious point here is that if we just keep on using platinum coins or just mint $100 trillion platinum coin, then there
Mhm.
would be no need to issue any debt again. And also, why would there be a crisis if the United States was proceeding to pay off all the debt as it fell due? Why would that create a crisis? The only crisis that would create would be the private sector would be screaming for more debt as they screamed in Australia in the early 1980s when the Australians actually paid off their debt. And then
Mhm.
the private sector started screaming at them, we need that debt. We need a safe investment. We got to have a safe place to put our money. So you got to start issuing debt again, which at that time the Australians did. And so after they paid off their debt, the private sector. So it doesn't create a lack of confidence
No.
in government debt.
Well, the
So
Bank of Japan did the same thing, right?
uh,
Japan did the same
so
thing.
what Obama was doing there was he was consciously conflating the 14th Amendment solution with the platinum coin seigniorage solution. And the
Yeah.
press did not have the wit to disentangle the two and to push him to the wall on that. So it quieted the press in terms of their asking him uncomfortable questions I think he said this somewhere around January 8th or 9th of 2013. But the blogs about platinum coin seniorage still continued because no deal had been made with the Republicans yet. Okay. So he made a deal with them. It was a few days later on, okay, in January, where they actually compromised on a fiscal cliff deal that both parties agreed upon, and caused austerity, okay, because across the board cuts were made as a result of the fiscal cliff deal, okay, in 2013. That deal, and of course the earlier deal they made in 2011, both of those deals slowed down uh, 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 the recovery from the crash of 2008. Those deals were the reason why the recovery was the slowest on record since the Second World War. It took 6 years to recover from the recession, okay, of 2008, 6 or 7 years, okay, I forget which. And it was because of these compromises that were being made, where the Republicans were getting into debt ceiling crises. And of course, that was traceable to the fact that the Republicans won in 2010, which was traceable to the fact that the Democrats were mainly interested in protecting their donors rather than in passing things that would please the people. And so in 2010, what did they have to run on? They had nothing to run on in 2010 because they hadn't done anything that people liked. The Affordable Care Act
That's a
in
failure.
2010 was delivering nothing at that point
because everybody knew what it was.
Well, it wasn't just that. They planned the implementation in such a way that the taxes for it were going to start as soon as it was passed, but it wouldn't be fully implemented in until 2013 or 2014. So people weren't getting any benefit from it, but they were paying taxes from it. And the Republicans were, of course, smearing it. And there were no counter messages to the smear because the act wasn't in place. They didn't have any positive stories to circulate. So for the rest of 2010, 2011, 2012, they were getting smeared for the Affordable Care Act, and they had no comebacks. So that was political malpractice in the first place. But that's getting away from the MMT part of the story. The MMTers went back to blogging, and a lot of the blogging was political, okay, at that time, and MMT was making inroads. Then the next big thing to happen, well, from my personal point of view, the next big thing to happen was my publication in March of 2013 of my Fixing the Deck book, which is the only book on the platinum coin that has been written up to this point. I expect over the next 2 years that Rowan will probably come back with a book, on the platinum coin.
Probably.
But as of now, the only book out on it is the 2013 book I wrote, which I revised in a second edition and added more to in 2014, in January of 2014. And so anyway, from my personal point of view, that came out, but purely from the MMT point of view, probably the most important thing to happen was Bernie Sanders' constitution of his dream team, okay, of economists. And there were 4 MMT members on the dream team. I think altogether there are 12 people on the team. I forget, exactly who all was on it. I remember Robert Reich was on it. Jeffrey Sachs, was also on it. I think that Bob Pollan of the University of Massachusetts' Amherst was also on it. I think Rick Wolf, okay, was on it. But there
Mhm.
were four people who were either MMT friendly
Yep.
or uh, uh, spoke of themselves, okay, as MMTers.
Yep.
The first one, okay, was Jamie Galbraith, who never declared himself, okay, an MMTer, but who had been pushing MMT in various ways for years. And then
Yep.
there was Bill Black, who was appointed to the team, and Randy Ray and Stephanie
Mhm.
Kelton
Yep.
in 2013. So MMT was beginning to gain acceptance through the Sanders Dream Team idea and the alliances of these people with Bernie. And then, I believe it was in 2014, uh, because the Republicans took over the Senate
Mhm.
in the early part of 2015. But I believe in the fall of 2014, Stephanie was appointed to the Budget Committee of the Senate by Bernie Sanders as the chief economist of the majority side.
Yep.
Unfortunately, the Republicans won the Senate election in
Yep.
2014. So by January of 2013, she was immediately converted to the chief economist of the minority side, but she was still
Okay.
there as the chief economist, okay, for Bernie Sanders.
Yep.
And she served for the remainder of 2014, and I think uh, for 2015 in that capacity. I'm not sure of
Yep.
the date, but at some point she converted to the chief economist to Bernie's campaign. And I believe that was in 2016, okay, at some
Mhm.
time. And of course, as a major campaign advisor to the campaign, I think she
Yep.
had to resign from, from uh, her position as chief economist, okay, on the committee.
Yep.
But as time was moving on during 2014 and 2015, she got to meet quite a lot of people in Washington and to brief them, okay, on MMT.
Yep.
And she's really very, very persuasive. She's
Yes.
very personable. She's
Yep.
very nice. She easily fits into particular situations. She's always
Mm.
rational. She never calls people names. She's a
Mm.
delight to work with. And so she was very influential on the inside in Washington circles, talking with people from various think tanks,
Mhm.
because she was persona grata, because she was, chief economist for the Democrats on the Senate Budget
Yep.
Committee. So a lot of doors were open to her that had not been before, and she could
Yep.
spread the MMT gospel in Washington, which she did at that time. So
Yep.
that was very important. And her role in the campaign was very important, okay, as well.
Well,
Bernie never explicitly embraced the MMT notions, and he kept on running as a tax and spend type of Democrat, an
so
old
did
style.
FDR. So
Uh,
did FDR.
sure. Okay, so he kept on running that way, even though he knew better. She could
Mhm.
never get him to take on the educational task in terms of the larger public, to beginning to talk in terms of MMT and the notions, okay, of MMT. He just didn't want to take on that burden for the campaign.
Nope.
Okay, but nevertheless,
Well,
um,
go ahead.
on the
I just don't
inside,
agree with that, but go ahead. Yeah.
um, um,
I don't believe that he did it for that reason, but
that may be, but anyway, on the inside of the campaign, of course, she was able to talk to many, many people through the campaign and begin to brief them, on MMT, and to spread some of the basic ideas
Yeah.
around. And all through this time, she was writing her book. She must have begun to write it back in 2009, and she was very, very carefully crafting it all through this time.
Yes. A
Japan.
large part of it is based on her Senate committee. She talks about that at length, and the
She does.
force that she got back, and that's really a large part of the book. But I agree that she must have been writing it. I love that Kelton came at this as an opponent. So when she first came in, she wanted to prove this wrong, and ended up completely getting converted. That's always the best person to have in charge of spreading a message, is the one that's been converted because the facts are there and they believe them. Now, and they were skeptic to begin with, and the facts, changed their mind. That's always going to be the best person to talk about it.
Yes, that's true. But in her case, it was not as it so often is in situations like that. Okay, a conversion situation, of a religious kind. She saw the facts, she saw the logic, and she
Yeah.
became an MMT economist as a result of that. But her mind and her orientation to dealing with other people is always open.
Oh yeah, no, and I don't mean it that way. And I agree that it's not a feeling. But she came at this to actually be, and not necessarily opponent, but she was trying to debunk it. And in the early '90s, when she first, came, when Ray introduced her to this, and she even talked about it because a year after this, I went to the MMT conference, the first MMT conference in Kansas City, and that's where she discussed that. That's where Mosler discussed the other that goes along with everything that you're saying here, where he would go to Jackson Hole and all these high G7 type meetings. It wasn't G7, but the people that were in those meetings were there, and he would discuss MMT to them. Nobody refuted it. He would say all these things about the function of taxes and the relationship to deficits and debts, and they all agreed. None of them disagreed. And he said that's the striking thing, is that you have this complete agreement while you're sitting here at a dinner table with these really high-powered economists that are in the federal government, and then they get in public, and then it's like they don't remember. He had a hard time explaining how it could be one way behind and one way. I mean, he understood it was politics, but that is a really important. That's why I bring up that I don't really believe that Bernie Sanders didn't want to take the time to teach people. I don't think that he felt that it was necessary, and that that he doesn't completely believe in a lot of the principles behind it. He still kind of grabbed onto the Rob Reich world, and wanted to stay in that a little bit of a taxes and spending frame of mind. Just from the things he said later on, that's it. It wasn't just that he didn't think it was a total out and out fear and a belief that he didn't really fully buy into, that it was a way of enacting his budget and his ideas, but there was still had to be some form of tax that the people paid, and he discussed that at length at one time, and I can't remember where it was, and it made me realize that it just wasn't really a complete believer.
That might be so, but
It's okay. I'm not saying anything bad about it. I'm not trying to denigrate
uh,
Bernie. Bernie's just a politician. So don't get me wrong. I think he was
just a
great.
politician.
He lit
Okay,
me
but
up.
my point
So,
is that if he had run and educated on it in
oh yeah,
2016, then his 2020 run would have been
totally
much
different.
stronger, much
Yep,
stronger,
I agree. Yeah,
because
I
the
agree.
ideas would have been circulating.
Mhm.
with the prestige of his first run for those 4 years, and MMT would have gone much further, much faster
Yep.
if he had publicly embraced it.
Well, and knowing the system the way it is, he should have also, he knew that he wasn't going to win in 2016. He knew he wasn't going to win in 2020. My problem was, why don't you pretend that you're going to win, but actually put that word out there and run on something that is going to activate? You know, and that was he did activate, but there was a stopping point anyway, because
Yeah,
2020 should have ran as an independent and started a third party is what I'm getting at. And as far as that goes, so I think 2016 would have been to set up the economics, and 2020 would have been to set up a third party.
right.
But it didn't happen.
Yep, it didn't happen. It was an alternative thing.
Yep.
I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but they are MMT interventions. Okay, attempted MMT interventions. They never got popular, but
Yep.
I wrote 7 books, in which I applied MMT during the period from the start of the summer of 2015 through January of 2016. No, I wrote 6 books then, I should say. The 7th book was the Fixing the Debt book, which I wrote in 2013 and 2014. Now, all of these, are ebooks. The second of the books I talked about, fixing the debt already. So, second of these books was Declarations of Dependence. It was a book on trade, but tyranny, sovereignty, and also the threat to democracy coming from that. It was part of the fight against the trade agreements, which, by the way, was a successful fight.
Yep.
The TPP agreement, the TTIP agreement, and the TISA agreement. The TPP was the Pacific Agreement. The TTIP was a North Atlantic trade agreement. And the TISA was the Trade and Services Agreement, which was covering services. All the agreements were flawed because they had the investor state dispute settlement clause in them, which basically attacked the sovereignty of the United States, and which gave the corporations tremendous capability to freeze the laws of the United States, in a certain position. So, I argued against that. I used some MMT arguments because one of the things that was important, actually, from the MMT point of view, is that the trade agreements would have undermined the monetary sovereignty of the United States. And that's a key part of MMT. I was trying to block that. Then there was
And that was
another
because
book.
they could sue, right? That was because that they could sue laws that hurt their business. They could sue the state for enormous amounts of money, and in case like a cigarette tax. Well,
They
it
could
slowed down
sue the
cigarette.
states for enormous. They couldn't directly sue the states, but because the states were violating the treaty, by any decision that went in their favor would have been a decision that the federal government was on the hook for.
Yep.
So that's what was undermining the monetary sovereignty of the United States, because the federal government in the present setup is not on the hook for state debts. Okay.
Nope.
And if it had become on the hook for state debts, it would no longer be a monetary sovereign, because some other political units would have the capability of causing the federal government to have debts. So that was
Yep.
okay. So then I wrote a book called Austerity, Greece's Debt Crisis, and the Threat of Democracy. Okay, what happened there was I went to, well, there wasn't a conference, it was actually a seminar, which was convened by Bernie Sanders, and at which the ambassador from Greece spoke, and Bernie spoke, and the program was set up by Stephanie Kelton, okay, in her role as the chairperson, okay, of the Budget Committee,
Mhm.
okay, and the panelists who were discussing the debt crisis in Greece were Jamie Galbraith and Joe Stiglitz, and a guy by the name, okay,
Wow.
Kierkegaard. Uh,
Oh, yeah.
his name is Jacob Kierkegaard.
Yeah.
Okay, who's he's almost an Austrian economist. He's very, very conservative, and he
Mhm.
was working at U.S. Think tanks, and he still is. I forget where he is now, but he was the
Well, and
right wing.
Stiglitz is an architect of our current neoliberal system. One of them.
Sorry, Stiglitz is what?
Stiglitz is one of the architects of our neoliberal system.
He may be one of the architects, okay, of the neoliberal system, but he's become a very severe critic of it over a period of time. Okay, in other words, he's no longer a defender, okay, of the neoliberal system. He won a Nobel Prize, though.
He
Uh,
did.
okay, and okay, so what the panelists did in this is they spoke on the Greece situation, how it happened, and what the debt crisis was about. Okay, and Joe Stiglitz and Jamie Galbraith were very close together in their views of what had happened, and they basically agreed with the view that democracy was being taken away from the Greece by the Eurozone Troika. They were very, very close together in their presentations, okay, in their views. But Kierkegaard, of course, was defending the neoliberal ideas and also the Eurozone, okay, and the Troika. Okay, so basically what I did is I took very copious notes on that, and I was so motivated by the whole thing, that I wrote a short book on it, and
Mhm.
I outlined the origins of the threat to democracy, okay, in Greece, and the whole political situation, and then I supplemented it with some ways out that I thought, were going to work. Uh, at the same time, Bill Mitchell was offering some ways out as well. Bill's ways out were focused on doing something with the mainframe computing, and my way out was focusing on using screen scraper technology to
Mhm.
undermine the lockdowns that the IMF was able to impose on the banking system
Mhm.
of Greece. Okay, in other words, it had the power. The IMF had the power to shut down the banking system. Okay, of Greece. Okay, and there was some microcomputer software advances. Okay, that could undermine the control. Okay, the IMF had. And I suggested what those were, because at that time, the background I had in information technology was
Mhm.
very strong. I've been working in that for years. But Bill Mitchell was approaching things from the mainframe point of view, because his
Yeah.
background in mainframe information technology
Mhm.
was very strong. So both he
Yeah.
and I basically were coming in with critics of the way the
Mhm.
Greeks tried to handle this, and
Mhm.
tried to give them a way out. Uh,
Mhm.
this created quite a controversy at Naked, but Capitalism, uh, where uh, the proposals I was making were very heavily criticized by Nathan Tankus, okay, and Louis Project, who are looking at things from a mainframe point of view. And they also very heavily criticized the proposals, okay, that Bill Mitchell made. And so there was a heavy debate on this. Okay, and I'm not here to say who won that debate, but from the standpoint of the people who run things on, naked capitalism, okay, it was won by Nathan, okay, and by Louis Project, and so naked capitalism went, okay, with their analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but anyway, but there's the book. I still think it presents a good solution, okay, to the problems the Greeks had. That solution can be used by other nations of Europe if they start to have a problem with the Troika. Okay, so going past that, I also wrote a book on who needs balanced trade, who needs balanced budgets. And what that book, okay, is about, okay, there are different trade policy standards. Of course, there's the free trade standard. There's the balanced trade standard. There's the fair trade standard. None of those standards are actually consistent with another standard that one would be able to propose that comes from MMT. Specifically, the standard of having a benefit, a net benefit for public purpose. In other words, when you negotiate a trade deal, it should produce a net benefit for public purpose if you're going to be consistent, okay, with MMT. So I try to advance that standard in this book, to argue for it, and to also point out that fiscal policy and trade policy should be integrated around the public purpose standard.
Yep.
Okay, and as far as I know, I'm the only one to propose that until this time. Okay, I think I was right, okay, in this book, and that it still represents a very important thing for the federal government to try to implement.
Yeah, I'm very concerned with how they measure things out, where they have litmus tests and notions. It's much better to have the broad notion saying that everything needs to have a public purpose instead of having a certain amount in an account that they're counting to make sure that they reach. But I don't know if that quite, if it's sort of like saying we need civil rights, or saying we need civil rights that doesn't put people in jail and doesn't do. If you do it too specifically, they get around it. If you do it too broad, they have no choice but to spend money and make it happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely correct. Then I wrote a book called Fiscal Myths of the 2016 Campaign, which lays out something like, I forget if it's really 50, might be 53 fiscal myths, which were being talked about during the 2016 campaign. So that's what this book is. It's a catalog of fiscal myths and how to argue against them. It's very simple in concept. It also applied to 2020 because the myths didn't change between 2016 and 2020. And so if you're interested in a list of fiscal myths that people follow, there are these 50 to 53 myths, okay, in this particular book. There are also a lot of myths that Stephanie talks about and that Warren, had earlier talked about.
Yep.
My 53 fiscal myths includes and is more comprehensive than their treatment, okay, of the fiscal myths. Okay, that's not a criticism. It's just that what I set out to do was to catalog as many of the fiscal myths as I could find. They didn't start out that way. Okay, what they did in
They wanted to make sure it was readable for people who were just beginning.
yeah,
And you're talking about actually having a comprehensive list that people can go back to that already understand the concept.
yeah. What I'm trying to do is, kind of take an encyclopedia approach, sort of, to this.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, then I wrote two other volumes. They were all based on the idea of real fiscal responsibility, what that actually means from the point of view of the MMT lens. And those two volumes, the first volume was about the give up formula, which the progressive groups in the United States follow. That's basically the tax and spend idea. It's basically the idea that things have to be paid for with taxes. And of course, it gets them into arguments with all the right wing and conservatives, where they end up sharing the framing of things with the right wing conservatives. So that's what the first volume, okay, is about. If you share the frame, okay, with your opponents, then you're going to be on the losing end, because basically the progressives were, sharing the idea that, if you want a deficit spend, sooner or later you have to pay for it. And
Mm-hmm.
that pay for it always comes down to lower spending or higher taxes or something like that. So you're
Cut
in this
unemployment.
political game. Yeah. And it
Yeah.
results, okay, in unemployment. So I
Yep.
very heavily criticized that, through that book. The second book, okay, the second volume is about the austerity mongers, okay, in Washington, the people we're fighting. There's a whole austerity industry here in Washington. There's a network that was set up by Peter G. Peterson over a period of years, starting in the 1970s. Um,
Yep.
he began to work on this. But then he made a couple of $1 billion in uh, the early years of the 2000s, and then he invested $1 billion in setting up his foundation and in giving money to other parts of the network to make that network strong. So that book actually maps out, the networks, and also covers the fiscal summits that Peter G. Peterson had through 2015 and what went on at that those fiscal summits. If I have the time right now, I would cover all the other summits and go on and on. But the important point here is that though the network has been greatly weakened by the success, okay, of MMT and by the political interventions of MMT over a period of time, in the end, both Biden and Jay Powell,
Mm-hmm.
when pushed to it, have come down on the side of the Peterson network and on the side of austerity mongering. What Biden is assiduously doing right now is trying to cut down the deficit as much as he can and claim credit for cutting down. Oh, look how fiscally responsible I am.
Yep.
So, from the standpoint of real fiscally responsible, real fiscal responsibility, what he's really saying is, look how fiscally irresponsible I am, because I'm not spending money when I should be spending money to invest in things that are going to get rid of inflation. That's what he should be doing, but he's not.
He
Of
still
course.
thinks that he still thinks that he's in, in the Obama administration or in his early days in the early 2000s, when the United States could make a ton of financial and fiscal mistakes. I mean, and still come out on top. We don't have that space anymore. I mean, not only from the climate, but also from a world foreign standpoint. We actually don't have as many accidental restarts as we were able to sustain for his entire career. So he would have no understanding of the point that we're at, and he doesn't supply any advisors on his staff that would give him that information. And if they did, he'd probably fire them. and I've heard that he's not a good guy to work for. So I don't think he even tolerates any kind of he is stuck in that, and that's what we're being led by. And I'm not saying he's alone. Trump was stuck in the same mode. And I'm not trying to say that he's necessarily worse or better. I'm just saying that he
But
is
Trump,
not able to do it.
okay, I don't think Trump was as much stuck in that mode, okay, as Joe Biden is. I mean, I'm not trying to say that I want Trump back anyway. I
No,
certainly
I
do not. I'm very, very clear about that. I hate Trump for all kinds of other reasons. But
yeah,
the truth is, at one time in his administration, Trump said,
yes, we could
we
spend our
can
way.
print the money if we want to print the money. He
Yep.
realized he didn't have a full understanding of it. He didn't know why, but he knew we could print it. So he knew that if he had to run deficits, he could get those deficits and he didn't have to worry about paying for them. And when the CARES Act came around, he didn't care how large the deficit was. He went for the
Yep.
CARES Act. He wanted a further stimulus, towards the end of his reign, and he couldn't get it because Mitch would not give it to him, but he wanted it. Okay,
Yeah.
and he didn't care about the amount of the deficit. So, from the sheer point of view of caring about whether you pay for things, he wasn't like Biden. He didn't care so
No.
much whether you paid
Uh,
for things or did not pay for
but
things.
no, that's true. But he just wanted it to go into his pocket a little bit more than
Yeah,
Biden wanted
he
to go
wanted it
into.
to go into his pockets and his friends' pockets, and he wanted the
Yep.
second stimulus because he wanted to be reelected, and he
Yeah.
knew that having the second stimulus was going to get him reelected. That's why he
You
wanted it.
talked about when you talked about how that was the longest recovery we've ever had. That it took forever and it lasted 2 years, not even until our next recession in 2020. Everybody forgets that in January of 2020, before the pandemic, we were in a recession,
Right.
and and it was going to be a bad one because
So let me raise something else with you now because we are close to 10:30.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And what I want to raise with you is, okay, here's another slide with all the things we could talk about because basically I got to 2015, 2016. All
Yep.
kinds of things have gone on since then. For example, there have been for a number of years economists for peace and security meetings in Washington, D.C. They were run
Mm-hmm.
by Jamie Galbraith at first, and he's handed things off to Stephanie. Okay, and now someone else, okay, is taking them. But those meetings each year were featuring the MMT approach, okay, and MMT people. They were
Mm-hmm.
also featuring people from Social Security Works and from the EPI here in Washington. But the point is, they were meetings about policy and
Mm-hmm.
the MMT orientation and its application to policy. And, they were designed to try to make people familiar with the MMT position. And they were very successful in that way. There was even one I went to, I forget whether this was in 2018. I think it was in 2018, but there was one of these meetings where Ro Khanna came and talked.
Oh,
Bernie Sanders came and talked. Okay, and then of course there were presentations by Stephanie Kelton, and I think that Jamie gave a presentation. Okay, at that one also, and there were a number of very good presentations and panels at that same meeting. Jared Bernstein was in the audience, so it must have been in 2016 because Jared was still working for Joe Biden. Okay, at that time.
Okay.
Maybe it was in 2017 because in a way he was still working for Joe Biden in 2017, a favorite consultant. Well, what I'm trying to emphasize here is that these meetings were very political. Okay, in
Mhm.
fact. And Jared raised some questions about the MMT approach at one of these meetings, which led to a number of blog posts by Jared, who was
Mhm.
answered by Randy Ray and Stephanie Kelton, in co-authored blog posts, and by me in 6 separate blog posts, essentially taking Jared Bernstein
Yeah.
completely apart, in those blog posts.
Yeah.
So the point here is these economists for peace and security meetings, which happen every year, are very political and very policy oriented. And they're places where the MMT orientation is brought into policy, and that happens every year. Okay, but I'm not going to go through all these bullet points here. What I'd like to ask you is, would you like to come back next Monday to continue the work of laying out the politics of MMT from 2016 until today?
Sure. Do you mean next Tuesday? It's just a week from today, right?
A week from
Yep.
today, on Tuesday.
Awesome. Yes, I would be happy to. That'd be fine.
Okay, great. Okay, so then I'm sure you can add things to this list for that program the coming
Sure.
next week.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yep. Yeah. Do that.
okay, and then we can also deepen the discussion, okay, of the topics here.
Yeah. And maybe I'll dig into my stuff from Rowan Gray and a few other the training we got from Nathan Tankus in 2017, and that kind of discusses the real cause of taxation and coercion, and how to frame everything from one angle that doesn't show or talk about coercion, because that's one thing that people hate. But it's necessary, and is totally 100% part of everything we do at a government or corporate or at any level.
Right.
Anyway.
The only thing to keep in mind about that is we're looking at things from a policy intervention point of view. In other words,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
MMT
I'll tear it down.
trying to do policy intervention.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that the MMT, with the view where the banks taking over the coins, the Bitcoin, it would probably be on this list, and that's 2020, 2021, something like that.
Well, yes, I
Anyway,
think so too. And also
yeah.
something else that's not here because I didn't have time to specifically call it out was uh, the bill that was co-sponsored by Rashida, and by Pramila,
Mhm.
that was written with the assistance, okay, of Rowan Gray.
Yes.
The Automatic Boost to Communities Act,
Yep.
uh,
Yep.
which used $2 trillion coins to fund it.
Mhm.
Okay, so that is certainly something worth discussing because, as far as I know, that's the first time that the platinum coin actually got into a bill that was introduced into Congress. So that was a
Well,
significant thing to do.
the Green New Deal as well has a federal job guarantee.
Yes, had the federal job guarantee, but that hasn't been introduced into Congress. Well, wait a
No,
minute.
but
I,
that's a
I guess Ayanna Pressley introduced that into Congress,
yeah.
but I'm not sure she did it from the MMT point of view.
Well, she didn't do it from any point of view. It just says federal job guarantee. It doesn't have any specifics around it at all.
Yeah, right. And
The
so we
Green New
don't
Deal.
know whether she was aiming at an MMT style job guarantee or whether
Yeah.
she was aiming for something like a synthesis of the Dean Baker, Jared Bernstein version.
Yeah. But for me, that's Cherneva's research and development, and that's who I go to when I ever discuss the
And that's who
FJ.
I go to because that's the MMT version.
Well, it is, and but it's also so thorough and so easy to defend
Yes,
that
so
I
thorough and so easy to defend. and so easy also to defend from the point of view of looking at the possibilities
Abilities,
it
yes.
has for really creating a new society. And that's why
Yeah,
I,
if yeah, and I know that it's a secret. I mean, I know that she looks at it as a way of getting this legislation in with the least amount of friction. But it is the beginnings of a real socialist market society.
right, I think so too. Okay,
Yeah.
so there are some comments here. I don't know how many comments there are here. Uh, I don't see that many comments. I'm not sure why, but
Oh, I'm boring.
oh, I didn't think you were boring. I didn't think I was boring. I thought this was a real good stream. But in any case, there are
Yeah,
very few comments to go through. I don't know that we've got some hellos.
oh, good. Well, hello everybody. I do actually. My phone's gonna die anyway, so I am gonna have to head off. But
Okay,
uh,
I'll finish up.
but go ahead.
Okay, so we'll finish up the treatment next Tuesday then, right?
Sounds good. I'll be there.
Okay, thank you, Matt.
All right. Take care, Joe.
Bye. I thought I knocked this off. Yeah. Okay.
So interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was really good. Anyway, I don't know. Nobody came tonight. Stephen Wolfbrand said, "Hi, Sandy." I guess Sandy was there. Ah, yeah, Sandy was there at about 9:34. Uh, and we said hello to Brandy and Dolores before. And Lana piped up and said, "Yeah, that was November 2017. Roe, Bernie, etc. in D.C. I was at that one. Yeah, so was I, of course. We were there together, I think, Lana." And Bernie says the federal government apparently told student loan servicers not to contact borrowers about resuming payments. Huh. Well, that's interesting, but until there's something really official there, I don't, if I was, a student loan borrower, I would wait for something official.
Yeah.
Dolores says, "Great seeing you, Matt." If anybody knows why there were so few people here tonight, I would like to know. I know there was some confusion because there was a pre-recorded uh, there was a pre-recorded program that was supposed to be broadcast. It's a pre-recorded program, okay, of Rocco's that was uh, supposed to go on, okay, at 10 o'clock. Uh, okay, but that was canceled. So I don't know what could have been the reason why there are so few people here. But anyway, maybe something really important is going on this evening. But anyway, I will be back tomorrow with the in depth show. And what I'll be discussing tomorrow is uh, uh, jurisdiction stripping. In other words, jurisdiction stripping is perhaps not so simple as I have been actually presenting it. And tomorrow I want to discuss a more subtle version of what we can do in the area of uh, the jurisdiction stripping. So, okay, I will see you tomorrow. Okay, I don't know whether Lisa will be back then. Okay, she is supposed to be going home she hasn't been at home. She is supposed to be going home sometime this week, but I'm not sure exactly when or how long she'll be there. She has a lot of family business still to take care of, and I hope she'll be back tomorrow, but I don't know whether she will or not. So we shall see. The promo for tomorrow is already out. If you look for it, you will see that Lisa is not on the promo. But anyway, we shall see. So that's all for tonight. And I'll see you tomorrow. And of course, I'll see you for Dump the Incumbents on Thursday, okay, as well. So thank you for coming, everybody.